connecting politics with the policies. So picture politics as what goes on in the factory, and then policies as the end product. The quality of the end product is always dependent on the production process itself, this time the politicking. So we're starting off with the end product, which is a series of policies recently introduced by the federal government, the latest of which is scheduled to take off from early next year. I'm talking about the revised cash withdrawal policy, and that's coming on the heels of the Naira redesign, the recent redesign that was announced for 3 denominations of the Naira. And tonight, we take a cursory look at this policy. What does it say? A number of things the policy says, mainly. Let's just refresh, the memories of Nigerians, just in case you're wondering, what is this about? First, it says maximum cash withdrawal over the counter by individuals and corporates per week is 100,000 naira for individuals and 500,000 naira for corporates or organizations. So that's a major part of that recent policy that was introduced. And of course, withdrawal above these limits attract 5% and 10% processing fees, respectively. There's also the part that only 200 naira denominations will be in ATMs, 200 naira and below. There's also the maximum cash withdrawal via POS of 20,000 naira daily. And, well, the CBN goes further to say, in compelling circumstances, well, not exceeding once a month, by the way, cash withdrawals shall not exceed 5 million for individuals, 10 million for corporates. And again, that attracts the 5 and 10% processing fees. And there's also the layer of, different due diligence and information that will be required, BVN, notarized customer declaration, even approval in writing by the MD CEO of the bank authorizing the withdrawal. It's so much, but let's help you to break this down, condense this, and just make it as simple as possible so you can see the quality or otherwise of the policies that come out of the politicking. We're joined on the program tonight by a member of the National Assembly, Senator Matthew Orogide. Joins us live from our Abuja studio. He's the chairman, Senate Committee on Public Accounts. He represents Edo South in the upper chamber. Good evening, and thank you for joining us on the program, Senator.
Thank you very much, Kayode, for inviting me here.
Yeah, well, it's good to have you. And I imagine a lot of Nigerians who have had some days maybe to internalize this latest policy, and they're thinking, let's project ahead. What does this mean? How will this affect me as an individual? But I'd like to start off from the constituency that concerns you, which is the Senate. Some members raised concerns about this new policy, and it was agreed that, well, we have some nominees of the central bank coming for screening. We'll raise these issues with them. So I'd like you to tell Nigerians, by way of update, were they taken to task on this recent policy, and what was their response?
Oh, once again, thank you very much, Kayode. Indeed, it's a privilege for me, to come before, the Nigerian public. Let me say that right away, CBN, by virtue of the statutes establishing it, has the exclusive preserve, to turn up policies and, of course, implementation of policies, monetary policies, on behalf of the country. That is in the Establishment Act. So if you look at it statutorily, yes, their responsibility, to come up, with policies like this, and then, of course, to see to its implementation. But as you know, law is made, for man, and not the other way around. If the policy as initiated by CBN is not meeting the aspirations of the people, or we think that it's too draconian and too strange to, contemporary commercial activities, then of course we have to do some amendments and see to its review. But I want to say that right away, yes, since this matter broke on the floor of the Senate, there were contributions that were made by members. And of course, where it was rested was that the 2 directors whose names, had come through executive communication from Mr. President, where the members of the committee were really asked to interrogate them on this issue and, come up, with a recommendation to the Senate. So the Senate, let me put it very clearly, has not taken a decision on this matter. and we are waiting for the committee to report back this week, on their findings or whatever, contributions were made by those two directors, that were screened by the committee for confirmation of their appointment. Well, we all know what it is. We know what it is. What is strange is, the peculiarity of our situation. Cashless policy exists in other climes, and we know how it works. But in our own system, where there are a lot of contending issues that probably will not make us actualize the objective, then in which case we have to domesticate it within the workability of our own exigencies, our situation. So I think that is the fear.
Right.
Yes, a lot of businesses in Nigeria, they fall within what we describe MSMEs, the small, and medium, enterprises, that really are equally outside, of the banking system. And because they're outside of the banking system, how do we bring them? How do we bring them in? How do we make their businesses to thrive? The ordinary person around the corner that is operating, a POS machine, you are saying he can only get 20,000. We envisaged that, this business is certainly will suffer some, setback. And if anything, that will affect, the totality of our own economic activities in Nigeria. So that is the fear. And if you remember clearly the contribution of the Senate President on the floor on that day, he just said it that, yes, there's really nothing wrong about it, but to put it all of a sudden on Nigerian people that, we too have to look at it, let it meet the exigencies of, of our own, of our own time. So that is where we are. Until they report back, then we'll know really what it is.
Okay.
But let me equally
because
say
there was
that,
a sense, pardon me, Senator, let me just come in at that point.
At the commission hearing, at the committee level, even
right,
the
Senator, if you can hear me.
The CBN director that will be confirmed mentioned very clearly. And I think the CBN governor too corroborated that when he visited the president in Daura, I think last week. He said, look, we are amenable to whatever changes, that will meet, the desire of our people. But that is not to say that it is not a policy, that we really must embark on. So they have said that, yes, we can do some amendments to it, but to throw it, away altogether, that one is not possible.
Okay, so let me come in at this point, Senator. Let me just come in at this point, because it's been reported. If you can hear me, pardon me. It was reported, the sense a lot of people got was that of that meeting or the screening of sorts that the Senate had with those directors, that maybe the Senate was now convinced, or at least the committee that conducted that screening was now convinced based on that policy. But you say that they have not gotten back to the House, so that is not true. Am I right? All right.
Not gotten back.
Okay, so let's get to the nitty-gritty of it now.
The decision has to be that of this.
Of the Senate, of course. So let's maybe help Nigerians understand what to expect from this process, so they don't maybe have false hope or false expectations. Let's manage the expectations. How much of a change can the National Assembly, Senate, House of Reps have on this policy, seeing that, as you said, you started by saying the CBN has its right, based on the law that sets it up, to actually make these policies and pronouncements. Can you, in any case, in any eventuality, maybe suggest a change and push the CBN to change this? Let's just help Nigerians understand that. Can you do anything to change this?
I mean, I want to assure Nigerians very, definitely that, when the committee submits its reports, somehow, I've had interaction, with, one or two members of the committee, and I think what they are going to suggest to us really is going to be amendments, to the figures, that were mentioned, whether it is 20,000, 100,000, for individuals and 500,000 for corporate entities. Well, I believe there's going to be some adjustments. Certainly, there's going to be some adjustments.
How would you achieve that?
I alluded to it through, the governor of the central bank himself, that, they are certainly going to make some changes, at least to meet up with the exigency of our times.
I mean, how will you achieve that, Senator? I'm quite curious. Help Nigerians understand without, infringing on the law that sets up the CBN to be independent in its duties. So how would you actually do that? Because CBN, as you said earlier on, is in its rights. They can do that without having to lean or, wait on anyone to make that decision or suggest it to them.
Well, the policy is not going to be thrown overboard, not going to be thrown away just like that. Cashless policy is what obtains, in very civilized societies and all of that. So, we're in a global world, and Nigeria trying to get to it, but it's just the limits that we are talking about now. CBN too has prepared itself, from what we heard, from the CBN governor himself, that they had tried it before on 2 occasions, but that, this same resistance that came, from the public was what caused it that they had to drop. And of course, the implementation had actually started, if you remember, from the time of Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi. They took some states, thinking about 5 states and Abuja, for the experimentation. And that one has still been going on. You couldn't withdraw more than 500,000 naira, over the counter, here in Abuja. But in the states like Edo, you can, as an individual, you can still draw up to about 2 million, 3 million from your account. And then corporate entities about 5 million or 10 million. So, to some extent, it had begun in some of the states,
Right.
So I just believe central bank knows, that at least the desperation and the peculiarity of our times, there will be need for these limits, And I believe the Senate, the committee will recommend to the Senate, yes, even though we are going to accept the policy, but the limits, they're a bit low. And I believe, there will be increments, in the limits. That is what can be withdrawn.
When this was announced,
what of course can be, gotten from POS machines.
Right.
And activities, at those very low levels.
When this was announced originally and it was deliberated upon at, both houses, reports had it and captioned it that, politicians move against CBN's policy. And, it had that sense that politicians were against this, of which, members of the National Assembly are politicians as well, even though we've seen those arguing for and against this. And you have mentioned the MSMEs, the POS operators. As someone who represents people, at least you feel the pulse of people. So what limits then would you be pushing to the CBN in terms of the daily withdrawals, perhaps for POS operators? Maybe you'll be asking for a special, policy for them to cover their business needs. So what will be the recommendation to CBN in terms of the limit beyond 20,000?
Let me say this, whether it is policy or whether it is a law that is in the making, there is always, the inclusion of, the public, and I know that, the people we represent too are going to talk to us from our different constituencies. It's not just going to be a thing that we're going to do one day. When that report comes in, of course, the matter will still be brought, to the floor of the Senate, and it will be debated, and of course, probably have to have a time, to get feedbacks, from our constituents, and then of course we come up with it. Certainly, as a committee committee on banking, insurance, they certainly will invite the CBN, and of course we'll find common grounds on this matter.
The question is particularly, what limits would you be looking to at least procure for those MSMEs in terms of the daily limits, so that, the POS, for example, can be able to do their business outside of those limits, perhaps?
Let me say this, we are really not going into the reasons, the objective of the policy. People, have enunciated different reasons, what is supposed to achieve for us, apart from, changing, the way, we do things, particularly when it comes to cash transactions and all of that, in the face of it. If it is security or wanting to stop, people from, maybe doing one evil thing or the other, kidnapping, election rigging, or buying votes and all of that. But what I want to say is this, we are looking at it now from the prism of, the very low people who conduct, businesses or commercial activities. We too must be able to strike a balance. We still need to include them. We need to find, a common ground. That will say, okay, instead of maybe 20,000 naira for POS, we can take it to 50,000. But that figure again has to be determined from interaction with the people who are involved in these activities. But for us to, as a Senate, certainly we are not just going to fix figures, for CBN. And whatever is suggested, well, of course, these things have to be brought before the CBN, coming up with a policy to say, okay, this is what we can take, this is what we cannot take. And then we say, okay, this is what is expected, by the people. But I think we will find a common ground. As a Senate, I don't think we are really going to come up to say, this is what we take, these are the figures or these are the figures we are going to take without recourse to our constituents.
Right.
Have
Senator.
To consult with them. And then, of course, we'll come and then we say, this is what we think will be fair.
Right. As a politician, I'd like to know if you feel targeted, by extension, perhaps your colleagues as well in various interactions, by this policy. First, the Naira redesign, and this latest one, because it's coming off the back of reports of, lush funds being lodged, warehoused by politicians in order to prosecute the coming election. So from a politician's point of view, especially because it's also been reported that politicians are moving against this latest policy, do you maybe feel targeted by the CBN?
Not at all. As a person, not at all. In as much as I don't want to stand in gap, for politicians, I just believe, this issue of cash transactions, it has been with us from time, when it comes to, commercial activities, with our people. If you probably go to some of our markets, you have a lot of cash volume, more than you have. If you go to Onitsha market, you go to Aba market, you go to Balogun markets and all these big markets, where people transact, businesses in gold and what have you that cost, so much, huge sums of money. These people already, know that, yes, they need cash to do a lot of things. It's not only, targeted at, politicians. For me, I believe, yes, the redesign, if it's going to stop vote buying, why not? If the redesign is going to stop, paying huge ransoms to kidnappers and bandits and what have you, why not? If it's going to stop vote buying, why not? But at least let us take it as, a policy that we want to put in place, that will serve the greater majority of our people's interests, and I believe it's not targeted at me. I mean, I don't have anything to. I've been running elections, and I really have not. I've not had time, that where I have to distribute huge sums of money to people. And again, I'm not even running elections this time around. So I am just in for a good policy that will benefit the greater majority of our people. That's it.
Right. I'd also like to know if you share the same, if you agree with those who think that this gives government more control, it gives government more oversight, in fact, maybe undue influence on people's funds, their personal funds or, corporate funds. And some might be saying that maybe this is not entirely good, having that much control and oversight by government. After all, they say it is their money. I wonder what your thoughts on that is as well. Do you think that perhaps that's a way to look at it?
Well, first, let me say the individual rights, really cannot be trampled upon. The policy like this, redesigning your currency, if it's going to happen, and you are telling people that they must bring their money to the banks, in some other climes, it's an infringement of their fundamental rights. A person who has money has a right to keep his money in the house, not in the bank. If you go to America and you tell them that, look, you must bring your money in, they will tell you, anytime I bring in $1 to the bank, you can change it. But if you go to take me 10 years to bring all my money to the bank, then that's the time you have to change all the money that I have in my possession. I've earned this money, is my own. But in Nigeria, it's the other way. You are giving time limits, you must bring in all this money into the bank. CBN must change them. And again, to a large extent, people, oh, it's an infringement on my fundamental rights. I have a right to say, this is the time I'm going to bring my money to the bank to change. But what I would say is, just like we mentioned before, if not that the elections are around the corner, and of course, I think that was the position of the Senate too. Yes, we agree with CBN. Let's redesign our currency, okay? But the only thing is the time. With time, people get acquainted with new policies, and they walk up and make up their mind that yes, we are going to accept this. But to put it stricto sensu within the frame of, very limited time frame, certainly it's going to put people in a frenzy. Everybody is going to, be haggling and rushing and all of that, and taking the time, into consideration. That between now and January 31st, it has to go. We have not started now. We're going to start on the 15th of December to start sending our money, sending the old currencies back to the bank, and then. But you can be rest assured, when you have a large population of people, about 200 million, everybody coming to the bank between, 15th of December and then 21st. We're actually talking within 45 days.
Right.
So I just hope too that, since the information has been passed, a lot of Nigerians too will get ready, to exchange, their old currency for the new ones.
So we're winding down now, Senator. So it will be very interesting to see the debate on the floor when eventually this happens. Hopefully, I imagine this happens this week, right? Am I right?
Yes, hopefully, maybe from tomorrow.
Okay, from tomorrow. So what extension would you then be suggesting?
Submit their report tomorrow.
Okay, so what extension would you be suggesting, since you think maybe January the 31st is too close? What extension would you be suggesting?
Well, for the currency redesign, I think we have all agreed, the resolution that was passed by Senate, even though there were, dissent voices, eventually at least was voted upon that yes, is the exclusive preserve of CBN, to redesign our currencies within its competencies, within its statutory function. We had actually done that. I don't think the issue of currency redesign, can be changed. But the one of maximum cash withdrawals and all of that, I think it is the one that we have not taken a decision on. And if, of course, the committee recommends this is, what, of course, they found out, the Senate is still at liberty, to invite the CBN governor.
So would that be after the election? Would you be pushing for an extension for after the election or still before the election?
If it becomes exigent, why not? If it's after the election and a lot of people will find out they have not still be able to change their currencies, well, of course. What is important that you make laws for the comfort of the people. If eventually you find out that the people's interest is not being satisfied, then of course you have to you have to call it back and do the needful.
All right, we have to anchor at this point. Clearly, the coming days will be interesting, but we'd like to thank you so much for your insights. Senator Matthew Oride is the chairman, Senate Committee on Public Accounts. He's also a representative of Edo South. Thank you for your time on the program tonight.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much.